Welcome everybody to today's Center for Innovation Management Research event. So on behalf of CIMR, I would like to very warmly thank our speakers, and in particular the organizer Klaus Nielsen and the chair Birgitte Andersen for bringing such a topical item for debate today. I'd like to remind everyone that this event is being recorded and transcribed. What we do with the recordings and transcription is that the CIMR will publish a blog following on from the event, and we may publish the recording in full or in part on our YouTube channel. So if you don't want to be in that recording, could I ask you to keep your camera off and your microphone muted? So these are the housekeeping parts. And I would like to thank everyone who's come to participate today. So after we've heard from the four speakers, there will be the opportunity to ask questions or make comments on the presentations. To do that, I'll ask that you please raise your hand if you would like to speak, and the chair, Birgitte, will call you, or you use the Teams chat to engage with the speakers. I will also keep an eye on the chat and help Birgitte in this Q&A session at the end. So now, without further ado, I hand over to today's chair, Birgitte Andersen.
Thank you very much, Marion, and I would like to also welcome everybody here. In particular, I want to welcome the speakers, and I'll introduce you as you go on, and also welcome our participants, and I can see the number is swiftly increasing. So today's topic is surely very relevant: Techno-Nationalism and Geopolitical Risks, prospect for the US-China relationship. It could not be more topical. As of yesterday, Trump put a 10% tariff of China's import, and lots of other things are happening. So we are really moving towards a techno-nationalism rather than techno-globalism. And I have the top experts in the room here. And I want to hand over straight away. We get started. We are very fortunate to be joined by Professor Bengt Lundvall, who is really the national or the global guru on the areas of a national innovation system, coined the subject already in 1985. Now we have heard it so many times, so we all feel we are owning that term ourselves, but actually it was Bengt who came with the theoretical conceptual framework behind it, as he was at Aalborg universities, where I originally myself, of course, was a bachelor student before entering the UK straight after. But Bengt was also deputy director for the OECD, Directorate of Science, Technology and Industry, and he has been played a huge role in setting up the global its networks. I even believe that you lived in China for some time. I may be wrong, but Bengt, you have such a long accomplishment. So if there's anything you want to add, you can do that. Otherwise, we look forward to hear you.
Should I begin?
Yes.
Okay. I'm very happy to join this seminar. I reconnected with Klaus recently, and it's been a very good experience, and I think we're going to do more things together. And I can see that some of my very old beloved friends like Daniela Archibugi and Keith Smith are online. It's nice to see them as well. I can see Daniele somewhat. And this theme of techno-globalism, I think it was raised in a paper by Dick Nelson, together with one of his colleagues, at the time when Japan was becoming a serious competitor to United States. But in principle, it has been around always. And I think the most important historical example was when England stole or got access to technology to produce cannons from iron. I think it was in the 16th century through importing blacksmith from Europe. I think it's been around all the time. Techno-globalism has never been complete. It's been still a lot of protection of strategic technologies, especially in relation to military technology. Even that people who tell other people how to do atomic bombs, they got they got the death penalty. I think what happens is that techno-globalism, in a way, is based on a false assumption that all countries have equal access to science and technology. And this is actually the basis of a lot of neoclassical trade theory. In opposition to that, Friedrich List, the German economist who was in a polemic, he was polemic in relation to Adam Smith. He pointed out that the only way for Germany to catch up was to introduce protectionist measures, not so much to protect existing standard industry, but more to attract investments and technology from abroad and combining that with protecting the new industries which were coming. And I think that it's true that countries like China has taken over this basic philosophy. And what they did was, to begin with, they invited foreign direct big multinational firms in automobiles, telecom, and other areas to join, go into joint ventures with Chinese companies, and they expected that when they combine that with ambitious investment in knowledge, research, education, this would lead to a kind of transfer of technology to Chinese firms. Around 2005, there was a kind of awakening in China. They found that still they were almost not present in international patenting. Almost all high technology exports came from foreign firms in China. So this is where they, when they developed a strategy of what they call independent innovation. And what they did there was that they put much more emphasis on developing kind of contracts which included some technology transfer, and at the same time they focused a lot on technology management in the big firms, and also trying to orient their academic system more towards developing new technologies. This gradually, this strategy turned out to change the situation quite drastically, and soon, at some point, the United States and the rest of the West found that China was leading in important areas. And the Chinese Communist Party, of course, have this Marxist heritage where they think that productive forces are based on science and technology, and they put special emphasis on certain specific technologies, not least artificial intelligence. And I think that when the Chinese president Xi said that China should be world leader, I think it was in 2017, China should become the world leader in artificial intelligence. I think this triggered a very strong reaction from United States. And you can see the first protectionism already under Obama, and it's further developed under the first Trump and Biden. At some points, it's been presented as a trade war, but it became increasingly focused on technology war and related to semiconductors and also as China became dominating in green technologies, it was exposed to that area. So this is, I think, the background for where we stand today. I would like to say a few words on Trump, what we should expect in this new era. One notable thing, I think, is that we might see some new openings between China and the rest of the world. I have noted that India and China has become a little more engaged in discussions, and there might be an opening up of foreign direct investment and technology transfer from China to India. And I also noted that van der Leyen from European Commission has opened up for some more discussions with China with the arrival of Trump. So that might be one unintended consequence of this new regime. Another one is that Trump is transactional. I mean, he loves to make good deals. And Klaus Nielsen is later going to talk about how China lags seriously behind still in the most advanced areas of semiconductors. But China also have a bargaining chip, and this is some specific minerals which are crucial for further development of the second phase of the digital revolution, and which are also crucial for green technology. So let us see what's going to happen. I saw some opinion survey reported in Financial Times where it seemed like the Chinese were less unhappy with Trump than Europe. So that is quite interesting. My final word is to say that we're going to see much more techno-nationalism in the future. I'm just now trying to study and understand the Draghi report about Europe. And here it's quite striking that Draghi and several other mainstream neoclassical economists now openly says that what we need to do is to develop very specific technologies like semiconductors and capacity to process rare earth minerals, etc. And we need to use long-term planning, We need to use industrial policy, and we need to use trade policy to do that. But not at the national level, but at the European level. So I think to begin with, there was this expectation in the West that China would learn liberal democracy from the West. Now I think we see a different kind of learning process, that the West is learning that in order to have a strong position to cope with global warming, to develop the necessary technologies, etc., you need to have a long-term perspective. You need to have planning. You need to have a kind of coordination which most economists have earlier said would be quite inefficient. So this is my last word. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bengt, and thank you for your perspectives and insight. I will go straight on to the next speaker, so to get so much for the discussion as possible. So I would like to introduce now Professor Xiaming also to talk about techno-nationalism and the China-US relationship. And Xiaming is an international leader on international trade, foreign direct investment, and economic growth. Clearly have very close relationships, both in research and I assume also in private life between UK and China, and US and China maybe also. So over to you, Xiaming.
Yeah, I share my screen.
And Xiaming is a professor at the University of London, Birkbeck College, yeah?
Yeah, can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, my topic is about the techno-nationalism and the prospects for China-US relationship. So I will go through this quickly. Perhaps we spend more time in discussion. Okay. First, I would define techno-nationalism is the use of technology policies to achieve or maintain geopolitical advantages. It's different from so-called the mercantilism. I do not know how to define mercantilism, but from my view, it's different. Then, why China has been regarded as a threat to United States? The main reason is it's the introduction of Made in China 2025. So actually, this was driven by Chinese standards by several key considerations. First, economic driven. So to upgrade industries and overcome middle income trap, because China reached this stage, and then to close the technology gap with leading nations. So that's what the professor Lundvall already mentioned. Another is geopolitical drivers to reduce dependence on foreign powers, especially the United States. Okay, and then to strengthen the national security, along with economic growth, with national security priorities. And finally, it's about global surviving drivers to weather the political potential disruption in global trade and maintain sovereignty over critical industries. So actually, to some extent, China already foresaw this kind of possible situation. It's about the global supply chain problem. And then, of course, they attracted lots of criticism, especially the United States. And the concerns included forced technology transfer, intellectual property theft, and state subsidies to Chinese firms. Okay, so then nowadays, especially from Trump, so the global landscape now is depicted as zero-sum competition. So this actually totally ignores the positive aspect for the technology collaboration. Then, for this reason, U.S. tried to contain China. So you already know this kind of measures, especially the very recent ones, CHIPS and Science Act 2022. Of course, China has countered with its own export controls, especially the rare earth. That's very important for the new technology sector development. How to explain this phenomena? I feel that lots of explanations, but one explanation is perhaps more relevant than others. That's just hegemony theory. In the world, we only need one hegemony. That's the United States. Others just should not be too close to this the hegemony in terms of power, economic or military power. Otherwise, this will cause the instability of the world. Okay. Then China, in terms of purchasing power parity, already has the highest GDP. So China, as a result, is increasingly perceived as the challenger to U.S. economic primacy. Okay, this caused the tensions between the United States. Actually, China, to be honest, at this stage, does not yet pose an immediate threat to U.S. hegemony. Why? Because it's relatively the weaker military capabilities. Of course, China is still developing these capabilities very quickly. China very recently, you already noticed that, launched the 6th generation fighters, air fighters recently. Of course, China has less resilient economic structure. But China's strategic intention actually is not to fight against the United States, is not to challenge the United States hegemony. Rather, as Xi Jinping already emphasized, China wanted to avoid the suicide trap, and China tried to pursue peace, harmony, and coexistence. For the future, I feel that the relationship between the United States and China will likely continue to be characterized by co-opetition, a mix of competition and operations. So that's just my basic views. We do not have much time to expand this kind of discussion. So maybe my presentation, so we can discuss later on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Xiaming, and for your insight as well. And we will move on now to Assistant Professor John Diamondopoulos. who is an assistant professor at the Regent's College at Public University of London, and also a doctoral researcher at Birkbeck, and a specialist on US-China political risk. And over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll wait for the slides, but basically what I'll do is I'll introduce a little bit of my research. I'm doing a PhD, and it's called Great Power Dyadic Risk. Dyadic risk is risk between two powers, so it focuses on the US-China relationship. And I'm looking mainly at it from a, I would say, a market financial point of view, political risk perceptions, and then firm valuation. And I'm interested mainly in technology firms, but also other firms that get caught up in this sort of friction between the two powers at the moment. So let me have the next slide, please. Yeah. So in short, the as I mentioned, it's going to be a conceptual paper. So I'm looking at it in order to frame a conceptual model on how this could evolve over time. So I'm looking at it from 2010 or earlier up to the present time. And, you know, obviously we had Clinton, then we had Obama, then we had Trump and Biden, and Trump again. And the research question is basically, how does great power competition increase dyadic political risk, and what are the implications for market perceptions of firm valuation? Next slide, please. So in short, I'm using a critical realist philosophy. So it's basically a complicated philosophy where, you know, you look at the what the layperson says, you translate it into sort of scientific language, and then there's sort of this overlying structure that is unseen, that sort of it's called reductive structure. It's sort of a mechanism on how the whole process will work. So next slide, please. And it's using case studies for part of it. So I will look at the different time periods and use basically content analysis, you know, within, you know, one single case study, which is essentially the US-China dyadic risk. Next slide, please. And there is already a model, or several models probably out there, but the one that I'm targeting more to sort of, you know, that I'm looking at closely is the one by Professor Liu. And this is sort of, it has some assumptions. It says political realism, which is a sort of IR theory. I'm not sure if that, you know, this is a simplification, you know, so over a long period of time, and we're talking, you know, the early 2000s up until now, I'm not sure if that IR theory is the right one to use, but nonetheless, it leads to techno-nationalism. And basically, as some of the other speakers have already mentioned, there is risk, you know, to a lot of the firms. And there is a model on the right that says, you know, on one side, you have market dependency, low to high, and then you have technological dependency. And it lists several examples of firms that could be in those categories. So that means that those firms, if the risk goes up, those firms obviously could get hit more in terms of their sales profits and their business ability. Next slide, please. So in short, this is sort of a, I would say, a view of it. So I will develop a theoretical framework. There's a process model which takes into account time. And then there's obviously the end result, which is perceptions. And, you know, so it'll be a sort of model showing how the whole process will work. Next slide, please. And just to give you a view of the time frame. So this has been going on, I think, well, let's, you know, we have to go back to Nixon, so that would be 1972. So obviously that's the opening up of China. And then there's the 2001 major event when China entered WTO under President Clinton. That was the hope that China would actually be part of the current system, and it would work under that hope. And basically, it was also, I think, the Western view of trying to change the political system in China as well, hoping that eventually, you know, as China gets bigger and there's a bigger middle class, and the middle class is going to ask for political representation. And, eventually the CCP would have to do some type of deal. And in the hope that it would become a democracy. And there's a theory in IR that says democracies don't fight. So then, the system would be stable. So that was basically the idea. And then we get into the pivot to Asia, which was under Obama. The U.S. started to realize that probably there would be friction in the future. And the U.S. strategy was to pivot, towards Asia, meaning that not necessarily ignoring the other worlds like, the EU and the transatlantic relationship or the Middle East, but essentially being more focused on Asia because that's where they saw the threat. At the same time, President Xi unveiled the Belt and Road Initiative, which, besides the economic, I would say, reasons and the logic, there's also a geopolitical, aspect to it. So the U.S. probably saw that as a threat, along with the Asian. There was a development bank that specifically finances the Belt and Road. So those were institutions that were based in Beijing that were against, say, the institutions like the World Bank and the IMF that came after the Second World War. So it was probably the U.S. At that time saw it as an attempt to maybe overturn the global system at that point. Then under Trump, it got worse. I remember reading, lots of articles, in the Financial Times, or the Nikkei Asian newspaper. There was lots of friction at that time between the U.S. and China, where each one was trying to get smaller states to go one way or the other, and it specifically concerned the Pacific with the micro states there, where China was trying to get sway, and the U.S. was pushing back along with Australia and eventually Japan. So that was probably the start of it. And then the Huawei incident, I think, is the first major, major company that fell under this techno-nationalism, or this term that we call it. And then the U.S. tried to, I think, with several allies, try to convert their technology system. Their telecommunications grid away from Huawei. I think in the EU, there's 27 members, and I think 11 of them at the moment, have completely converted. And then there's some that are, that's probably going to take more time to get rid of Huawei in that system. So this was the start of tariffs as well, and retaliatory tariffs from China. And then under Biden, the situation probably improved in terms of the geopolitical, but the situation in terms of technology got worse with Biden obviously going further. And this is the start of probably the semiconductor bit, because AI became more prevalent during this time. And AI obviously has uses in warfare, and obviously countries, do not share, their technology that could be potentially used for war. So let me go to the next slide, please. So this is just the same thing. Sorry. Let's go to the next slide. So I see this whole thing. I'll wrap it up very quick. Let's go back one more. So I see techno-nationalism as part of geoeconomics, which is, it's a difficult term to explain, but it basically includes lots of things, even the use of the US dollar and the US financial system against Russia during the recent Russian-Ukrainian war. So we have a split of the world, and it's a very dangerous situation, which is China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea against, the West at the moment. And then there's, obviously the South, the global South, which is the rest of it. In short, I see techno-nationalism as falling into an economic weapon that can be used in a economic tools. What do I see in the future? I'll wrap it up. Sorry, maybe I'm taking too much time. I don't see the future getting any better. So I agree with the previous two speakers roughly. I think it's going to become more tense over time. I see China as having several problems economically, and it's borne out by the FDI. That's really following through. They have a demographic problem, and at the same time, the policies that have been implemented, by President Xi have actually gone against them in terms of FDI. And the third thing is there's a lot of Belt and Road projects which probably are not viable. So that that's going to come due within probably 7 to 10 years. So all those factors would make it a timing issue. So if the U.S., in my opinion, can prevent China from gaining a technological edge within the next few years, so let's say the next 5 to 7 years, the window of opportunity of China actually breaking out, and doing more, there's a lot of geopolitics behind this, I think are really difficult. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. And before the discussion, we have our final speaker. This is Professor Klaus Nielsen, and he's a professor of institutional economics at Birkbeck College, specialized in the area of variety of capitalism, innovation, and social capital. So over to you, Klaus.
Thank you, Birgitte. I try to be a little more narrow in scope in this presentation here. I think what we've been told by Bengt and Xiaming and John here are highly relevant, and I want to kind of apply this in a more specific sector, which is semiconductors, which is of course not an unimportant sector. It's a backbone of artificial intelligence, the more kind of material kind of foundation of much of the more promising technologies here. And the question here is that is this a sector where the boundaries of China's techno-nationalist strategy will appear, or is it just like other areas where China are actually catching up very quickly? So I'll just say my background for this is not that I'm a specialist in this. I've read through various consultancy reports and a few newspaper articles and journal articles, but it's not a kind of in-depth study. But so if I would appreciate if there anyone who knows more about it who could correct me or tell me where to go on here. But just to start in the same place as Xiaming, in the sense that why and how have China been gaining ground in terms of technology here, and what are in a sense the positive outcome of the for China of the Made in China 2025 strategy. I think if you measure situation now with how it was 10 years ago, it's quite obvious that Made in China have been a huge success. If you look at how China is being competitive in a lot of the future industries, and in terms of manufacturing, and also maybe less so in innovation, but still I would say this major change in strategy in China from 2015 has where China would not any longer try to outcompete the other countries in the world in terms of low price goods or so on, but upgrade in terms of technology have been a huge success. Some of the indicators for this is there was, for instance, a report from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute in last year, and had this, for some people, pretty shocking result that they have a kind of tracking methodology where they look at core future technologies, and what it showed was that China was actually leading in 57 out of 64 of the core future technologies. They were leading in it and what were they leading in? It was in research. in these core future technologies, not necessarily in terms of outcome. And of course, United States have some huge advantages in terms of finance and so on, which makes venture capital, which makes it not necessarily the outcome of result will not necessarily of research will not necessarily be a result in terms of technological progress, but it's still it's quite remarkable that China is leading research in almost all areas. I can tell you the areas where they are not are things like high performance computing, semiconductors, AI, space launch systems, small satellites, vaccines, and medical countermeasures and quantum computing. But in all other areas, basically all areas of clean tech, China is far in the lead here. There was a report last year, a similar one of McKinsey, who outlined 18 emerging industries, and also could see China not as profound or as in the other study, but still China gaining ground very, very quickly. What has happened here is, as also described in previous presentations here, that US attempts to restrict Chinese technological advance because of the new the changed perception of the threat of China, and that has happened in many ways. But you could argue that this strategy, in some sense, have backfired, because what has happened in almost all areas is that China have responded by being self-sufficient, be developing their own supply lines, and so in many of the areas where there have been embargoes or tariffs and so on, then the effects of the American war on Chinese tech has been that China has actually developed within this area where they are, it was meant to hold China's tech back. So there have been unintended consequences and China have been able to develop in all the areas, especially clean tech, but many other areas. There's one exception, which is the semiconductor industry. And that's why I focus on this. Is that an example where China is not able to catch up, or will experience many problems of it, or it will take a long time, or whatever? So that is the subject here. So what has happened in that area is this: there is this, well, you could call it a chips war. From US, there have been a ban on various companies. Huawei was the first one. There have been this Chips and Science Act in 2022 with the enormous subsidies and tax credits for companies in this area here. There have been quite recently quite heavy export curbs initiatives and actually this month it was specified by a new act from Washington that there were 3 tiers of countries, a few of them where were no restrictions, and a third tier where they'd actually banned. So that is the foreign company. You could not export for China and North Korea, Russia, other countries. What happened also here in a few months ago is that China retaliated by introducing an export ban on vital chip-making material. Things like, let me see if I can say it right, gallium, germanium, antimony, and super hard materials like graphite. And so what has happened here is that there is China's advantages in the supply of rare earth. they are kind of using this in a retaliation, and I've not seen much study of what that would mean. I've seen the U.S. Geological Survey estimated that it would lower U.S. GDP by $4.4 billion, which is not enough, not much, but there would probably be a lot of indirect effects as well. But so there's been this chips war, and what are the outcome of this? It's quite clear that it's been efficient in the sense that China is lagging behind US and other countries like South Korea, Taiwan, Netherlands in this area. They have trouble developing the high performance chips. China produces a high share of the chips at the world level, but they have problems developing, designing and manufacturing and so on these high performance chips, which are absolutely crucial in development of AI. So that is there's no doubt about it, but there's also been some unintended consequences that, well, Chinese US companies, because of the lack of export income from selling their products to China, have reduced profits and reduced R&D compared to what they would elsewhere. There have been counter efforts in China, which seems to mimic the same catching up effects of developing their own supply lines and so on in China. But still, you would say US had bought some time. There are how much differs from different researchers here, but normally people would say, well, China, well, some would say 18 months, some would say 3 years and so on, but China will catch up at one point because of their efforts, but US have a window of time to do something different here, and it's crucial how this is used. If it's used for more incremental innovation, then China will very soon catch up with this as well. It requires some kind of more radical innovation. So to use this window of time for more radical innovation, where China will have problems catching up, and this is an area where economically, it's a winner takes all kind of competition here. So this is what we will see in the coming years. That are US able to develop these new frontiers? They are the tech bros are talking about here, and can that change the parameters of the competition between US and China? What happens with this retaliation of China? I'm very soon finished here. We don't know yet. I don't think I've seen much here. Maybe Trump's attempts of buying Greenland with all their rare earth is part of it. But apart from this, I think it's too new to say what the effect would be on this. And what about Trump? What will he do here? I think I've actually seen very little about him, but he has of course a tendency to kind of say all of that what Biden have introduced was bad, and let's get rid of it. So, and in terms of the Chips and Research Act, I think he has said at one point, why it's far too expensive. Let's drop it. And let's just put tariffs on import of Chinese semiconductors. So, well, I don't think that will be a very beneficial for US, but let's see.
Thank you very much. Okay, so if you remove your slide again, then we can see the full everybody who's attending, because we need to see now who's actually having questions. Klaus, will you take this? Yeah. Great. Okay, so clear. I'm sure we all have many questions. I personally have questions myself. I'm just trying to see out if there's anybody who got their hand up. Otherwise, Yeah, we need to have the slide gone. I can see, Daniel Akibuchi, you got your hand up. And while you put your question, Klaus, can you take the slide down?
So I'm trying.
Or Marion, maybe you could take it down.
I don't have the control. If you see, yeah, no.
Is it now?
Can the top bar stop sharing?
Yeah.
Hello.
So Daniel. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Birgitte. Good afternoon to everybody. I just want to inform that I'm not alone. I'm here with Alberto Maria Radice, a young postdoc, which unfortunately is very much into geopolitics. And so I'm very worried that Bengt and our colleague John have somehow reinforced his bad views about geopolitics rather than my cosmopolitan dreams. All in all, I got a specific question for Klaus and one for Bengt. For Klaus, I got very much interested about the data you cited. While you were talking, I tried to search in the internet and I've seen that this is an assessment made by the Australian Institute for Policy Analysis. So I will download and read the report, but immediately, what is the source that they are used in order to assess that China is leading in so many new technologies? And I'm telling it because, as I said in the chat, I made a different assessment based on patent statistics, and according to this assessment, it is not true that China is leading in so many technologies. It's definitely improving very much, it's going ahead, but it seems that the United States and Europe are still leading in some areas, and therefore somehow who is leading depends also on the typology of indicators that you take into account. For Bengt, I got another more politically oriented question. I know that Bengt has always had an inclination towards the Chinese Communist Party in one way or the other. And when I was in China last July, actually, I was just I ended my journey in Xiaming, just in front of Taiwan. And actually, you could see Taiwan with quite a lot of lands. So Taiwan was there and China was there. And everybody there was worrying that a war might start any minute to conquer Taiwan and so on. Other people said that that was not wise, that the status quo was better. And a few Westerners living there were wondering if the appropriate strategy would have been for us Westerners living in democratic countries to join the Chinese Communist Party in order to reinforce the moderate side. Unfortunately, we discovered that the Chinese Communist Party do not accept membership from non-Chinese members. And therefore, Bengt and I won't be able to join the Chinese Communist Party. But my question to Bengt would be, do you think that we can somehow introduce some signs of reformist policy in the Chinese Communist Party? And have you got any idea on how we can do it? Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if you can respond somewhat, it's a great question, but you can respond somewhat short. So maybe there are other people who would want to ask questions as well. So a short reply, and then we'll take other people in.
Should
who
I
wants to go
start?
first? Yeah.
Well, I'm
Klaus.
brief, so I can go first here. I think you're right to raise this question, Daniel, about the methodology, about the Australian study, because, well, the data are research output. research articles and so on, and it's seems the share of research output in a certain area, and that is where all the funding of research by different in the Made in China 2025 Act has had effect on enormous funding of research in various future areas. So it's not about patents, it's not about about production, it's about research articles.
And Bengt? You're muted, Bengt. You muted yourself.
Dear Daniela, you're always in there for a good joke, huh? But seriously, I think that China has something, a special resource, which the US and most of the West does not have. And this resource is not minerals, but it's patience. I think they are much less impatient than their counterparts in the West. And I think many of the attempts to make life more difficult for the Chinese party and for the Chinese generally will turn out not to work in the very long run. And I think they will be around in the very long run.
Thank you very much. I'm out of time. I just need to take the next question as well. Brian Fry, you have a question?
Thank you, Birgitte. Yes, Brian Fry here from Ravelin Consulting. Just a question regarding Taiwan specifically.
Can you introduce again where you're from?
Ravelin Consulting is the name of my company. And the question I have is with relation to Taiwan, and you hear numerous news stories about the potential threat of invasion of Taiwan by China, and would like to understand perhaps from John about your theory of co-opetition between the US and China, and how that would likely play out should that take place.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah,
And when I can see there is no more else having a question, I'll ask my question as well. And you can look at maybe both at the same time. One thing in the ecosystem that we need to look at here are data and data use and data access. And we are harvesting data now from behavioral data, health data, finance data, entertainment data, criminal data, genetic code data. Everything's being harvested, but they've got very different data regulation in China, Europe, and US. But both US and China has much more loose data regulation than we have, and even data today can control democracy and other areas, as we know, the media. But maybe you would. So the question is, where do you see data fits into this kind of geopolitical tensions? And the other thing is that the semiconductor industry is a very expensive industry. It does require a national strategy on it, as we have in the UK, because it needs lots of public funding to do the R&D, and even manufacturing of it is very, very expensive. It's not like sitting in your bedroom inventing a new platform. This costs in the billions. Does that have any impact on why it's about US and China and not the rest of the world? So, and that's to all of you. So I don't know who wants to speak first. Maybe, Bengt, you start, and then we can go to. No, Dominic, you want to start? You start. John, you can start, and then we can have Bengt. Everybody can comment on all three questions.
Yeah, I can mention about data. Recently, Trump mentioned about Panama, and there's one Chinese company at both ends of the Panama Canal. So they're getting data, for example, of ships going by, and in a likely scenario, an unlikely scenario, say war between US and China, they could actually stop maybe the flow of ships at one point. So data there is one situation. Also, China requiring data, from foreign companies being in China, and then the CCP has access to that data is another issue. Now, to go over to the other question regarding Taiwan, I'll try to answer that briefly. I don't see a war in Taiwan, and specifically for the reason that the U.S. will pivot to Asia under Trump. I see that happening. And I also see the semiconductor ban slowing down Chinese development. In time, there's a dangerous period probably in the next, I would say 3, maybe 7 years, where actually China can successfully or can make an attempt to attack Taiwan. But I think that period will start to fade, as I mentioned earlier, because of demographics, because there's a slowing Chinese economy. Currently, they say 5%, but the actual growth could be 2 to 3%. So if the Chinese economy grows at 2 to 3%, and in the future you have more retirees than you have workers, that's all going to come into play in terms of this growth that's been, I would say, out of this world in the past decades. That's not going to continue. And how is China going to be able to grow out of it? There was either the growth through exports or growth through domestically. But obviously there's some problems domestically in China. So I just a short answer. I'm sorry, I could give a longer answer, but a short answer.
I know.
I don't think that there'll be a war.
Thank you very much. Bengt. Do you have reflection on the questions?
I think population is important, but so is education, and I think it's a fact that about 60% of each young generation now goes to higher education in China, and it means that the new cohorts of people who enter the labor market will have a much higher skill level than the cohorts which leave the labor market. In the short run, this has resulted in extremely high unemployment among young scholars. But gradually, if the system is transformed so that it can absorb these qualifications, that might compensate for the fact that quantitative growth in the labor force will disappear. There is a video by Jeffrey Sachs on Taiwan, where he appears together with a parliament member from Taiwan, and he takes a rather radical stance. And he thinks that his most worst scenario is that United States succeeds in provoking a new Ukraine war in Taiwan. I would not say that he's necessarily fully right, because I know he has been fully wrong in other situations, but it's interesting to follow this kind of argument as contrast to the kind of mainstream arguments going on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Xiaming, do you have any reflections on the questions?
Yeah, I would first say the different views between Western and China. It's a relationship between mainland China and Taiwan. It's not invasion, because Taiwan is part of China. That's the Chinese position, also United Nations position. So this cannot be changed. But China, mainland China does not want to have a war, try to avoid this kind of war. They do their best to do that. China does not want to see the war in Europe, does not want to see war in Asia. So China does not want a war between Russia and Ukraine. So that's the key point. So I don't think there will be war between mainland and China and Taiwan. So in the forthcoming years, because China still wanted to develop its economy, develop its capabilities to deter any foreign interference into the Chinese internal affairs. That's Chinese position. I just tell you the Chinese position there. So the use of invasion would not be recognized by Chinese people, although it's very popular in Western media.
Thank you very much. And Klaus, do you have reflections on the questions?
Maybe it's not directly to your question, but I have a reflection which is maybe relevant here, that I think one aspect of the Chinese system which is important for the future is how long will Chinese citizens accept that so many resources are used on improving competitiveness, or on industrial policy and so on, and instead of maybe improving the health system and improving some of quality of life of Chinese. I think until now, because of the enormous growth, that have not been a major problem, but it will be if there's a kind of slowdown of growth that John talked about here. So that is one issue. And another issue, how long will they accept that the hukou system of that you big companies have very cheap labor because of this system where you're either in a rural or urban area and so on, and if you're in an urban area and if you're officially in a rural area, then you can get no social benefits or so on. How long will the Chinese population accept this, especially if the growth is slowing and so on? And this is something I think can change all of this year in quickly if it does.
Great. I am aware that we are now 10 minutes past the time, so we need to round up. But I want to ask all the four of you if you have some kind of comments on what you think are the biggest geopolitical risks which we will be facing. If we get really the techno-nationalism really take off. Is it just lack of growth? Is it slower growth rate? Is it poverty? Is it lack of democracy? Or whatever? What is the large geopolitical risk? If you could just comment on that while we round off, and then anything else you want to say before we finish. And I want to say to the audience also that we have there's a recording coming out or a transcript coming out after this here, so you will not have missed anything, and we can always look at it again. So who shall start? So we should do the order by which you were speaking. So Bengt, if you will comment on it first, and then do it shortly, and then we go around, and then we round up. You're muted. You're muted. You muted your microphone.
I try. Now I'm there. Okay, sorry. No, I think, as I said, the Trump era is bringing in, as everybody knows, even more uncertainty where we are going. I think it's uncertainty at some point. It's obviously pushing in a negative direction with the kind of leaving the Paris Agreement and all this. But what it could result in is that it provokes new types of alliances, which could have a more positive impact. So I think in the very long run, as Keynes said, we are not. At least I'm dead, but some of you as well. So, but I think, of course, that the climate issues are crucial, and here I think the competition in green technologies are good, but now I think the US left the competition. Cooperation could be extremely good if India could make use of green technologies from China and even develop their own on that basis. That could have a major impact on humanity in the long run.
Thank you. Xiaming, what's the biggest geopolitical risk to you, or the effect of the geopolitical risk?
Actually, China is used to now the uncertainty. Actually, do you know Trump has a nickname in Chinese social media? He's called Chuan Jianguo. Chuan means Trump. Jianguo, Jian means establish or build. Guo means country. It means China. Put another way, Trump is establishing state for China. What does it mean? Mean that if the Trump wants to contain China, this would awake China to innovate. So the history proves this. So then what's the best way solution? So I would recommend you to read New York Times. It's 18th December, the Friedman wrote the paper. He said that only the two guys can save the relationship between US and China. That's the Elon Musk and Taylor Swift. So Swift for the democratic for the as an ambassador for good relationship between two countries. And Musk said that US should also improve its manufacturing capacities so can just compete with China in terms of manufacturing. To me, I still keep my point. It's that it's the competition and the cooperation between two countries. But unfortunately, the Trump decided to withdraw these organizations. That's bad. But again, as the Professor Lundvall said, that this gives Chinese more chance to develop leading technologies in clean energy or something. This will let China become even greater in terms of technology development.
Thank you very much. And John Diamondopoulos?
Yes, hi. Just to follow up, I agree with the previous two speakers, especially Xiaming, on the Chinese. I think they're rational actors. So what I said earlier about Taiwan, I think they're not in the same camp as Russia and North Korea, obviously. They benefit from trade with the U.S., NAFTA, and also with the European Union. So there is hope that there will be cooperation, in that sense. I also agree that pulling out of the Paris Accords was a mistake, and I'm not happy that Trump won. So I'll leave that out. But I think he will be moderated by some of his advisors, and hopefully. And in the end, I don't think he's in for, escalating things too far. So, it looks like that probably with clean tech, he made a mistake, that China is already ahead in that area. And I think they will advance more. There was something yesterday, I believe, in the Financial Times, or maybe this morning, I saw a $500 billion fund for AI with the Japanese investor I forget his name, but the one 100 billion comes from Japan. So I think in the areas of AI and semiconductors, there will be, it will continue, as two sides. And I think it's important in geopolitical terms, I think the next probably, let's say 3 to 7 years are very, very important in terms of not starting World War III.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you very much. Thank you. And Klaus, your comments to the geopolitical risk?
I will not prolong it. I'll just say climate change, direct and indirect effects, the ongoing climate disaster, and then what happens after, US have kind of withdrawn from this, is that would create a lot of risks, both directly and the indirect effect on various countries.
Thank you so much. And I want to round up by thanking very, very much the speakers and for your time to come on here in the middle of the day. So that's fantastic. And we look forward to looking back at the video and the transcript from the video. Also, thank you to Marion Frenz, who has actually been behind also, not just welcoming, but also co-organizing this here. So thank you to you. And thank you to, of course, our intelligent audience that has been both from University of London, but also externally. And I hope that you have also enjoyed the session as much as I have. And I can see that everyone has. So thank you so much. And I think that Birkbeck will send you an auto link when the transcript is out. So thank you so much. And
thank you.
Thank you for coming. Yeah, thank you. And I think people could just log off. Yeah, or you become logged off. So.